uptake of counseling services should take place. And what she's saying is that aware that there are 200 classified types of mental disorders, the most common ones being clinical depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, and attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Concerned that Kenya's mental health policy estimates that about 25% of outpatients and about 40% of inpatients suffer from mental health conditions, with the most frequent diagnoses of mental illnesses made in general hospital settings being depression, substance abuse, stress, and anxiety disorders. Deeply concerned that the current worrying trend of increased domestic violence among Kenyan families has resulted in suicides, deaths and injuries, psychological trauma, orphaned and unstable children, noting that the prevalence of mental disorders may also be attributed to the noted cases of suicide, homicides, and violence at household level, and further noting that despite the strategies and guidelines that the government has put in place towards achieving the highest standard of mental health, prevalence of mental disorders remains high. So this urges the government to establish programs and interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services among individuals, family, communities to mitigate effects of mental disorders. That is one of the motions that may take off this morning if there is quorum. And now making his way into the chamber is the Deputy Speaker, who will preside over the sitting this morning. We do hope that you will have an enjoyable viewing this morning. This broadcast is brought to you courtesy of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation in conjunction with the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit. It's now time for prayers. Welcome.
Amen. Honorable members, we obviously don't have the required quorum. Therefore, I order the division bell to be rung.
There is a quorum hitch, and the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Moses Cheboi, has called for the bell to ring so that members can make their way into the House for the business this morning. And the quorum of the House is advised by Article 34(1)A of the Standing Orders, whereby a quorum or a committee of the whole House shall be 50 members. Right now, we have very few members in the House. They don't make the required 50. So indeed, the bell will ring to bring in members who could be within Parliament or who are making their way into the building. The weather has been a bit horrible this rainy season, and indeed, there could be problems of movement here and there. And there'll be quite some business this morning if the deliberations take place. We shall have the establishment of the civil registration centers in every constituency. This is a bill brought to the floor of the House by the Honorable Martha Wangari, member for Gilgil. Later on, there'll be creation of water collection and storage management systems in the cities and major towns in Kenya, a bill proposed by the Honorable George Kariuki. Later on, there'll be expansion of the school feeding program to all public primary schools, a bill being proposed by Honorable Vincent Kemosi Mogaka. And later on, we shall have the establishment of sports academies in every constituencies, as brought forward to the House by Honorable Ososi Godfrey. Yesterday, there was a bit of business done later in the evening, and the report of the Committee of the Whole House on Energy Bill was taken up, and it was dispensed of. So we had some business being cleared yesterday. We also had the Government Contracts Bill, National Assembly Bill number 9 of 2018, which did the first reading. And also there was the Committee of the Whole House, which is supposed to resume later on, of other bills that have been dispensed of in the floor of the House. Earlier on, I was saying that mental health in this country is of concern to many Kenyans, and indeed the Honorable Rose Museu has brought forward this establishment of programs and interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services. Quite a few members in the House, and we can only wait to see if they will make the number 50 of a quorum for any business to take place. Today being Wednesday, it's a private members' day for them to bring their business to the House. Yesterday's part of the establishment of the civil registration centers in every constituency, a bill brought by Honorable Martha Wangari, discussed a bit of what she is looking for, and aware that every birth in Kenya must be registered by the Department of Civil Registration and documented through a birth certificate. It has become very hard for many Kenyans to travel to the city of Nairobi to come and register births and register deaths. So she is asking that there should be establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency in the country, so that at least Kenyans can get their services within their constituencies. And these documents, of course, include identity cards and passports, school admissions, registration of exams, and access to opportunities such as employment really depend and rely on birth certificates. Members are streaming in, and soon I hope we shall attain the number required for any business of the House to commence. That is 50 members. That is according to the standing orders 34 1A of the National Assembly, which requires that for any meaningful business to take place, at least there should be 50 members seated in the chamber for that kind of business to take place. We shall also have creation of water collection and storage management systems in the cities and major towns in Kenya. This is quite appropriate considering that not much has been done now that there is so much rain that needs to happen. These are motions that have come to the floor of the House, and we hope that they'll be dispensed of so that there can be services to Kenyans. The motion of creating water collection and storage management is quite appropriate, especially at this time when there's so much rains all over the country. And indeed, if this water is harvested, the House urges the government to consider creating water collection, especially in the city. But members have actually made their way here, and soon we shall have 50 members and business will commence. This morning also, there is the service of the former member who passed on, Honorable Stanley Njindo Matiba, and many members may also find time to go and condole with the family as he is being prepared for his final resting. So there's quite some business going around in town, which involves members, considering that the late Matiba was a member of parliament. Indeed, some members may find it important that they be with the family this morning as they put him to rest.
Other members, now we have
still 50 members.
Quorum, and therefore business will begin.
Quorum has been obtained, and now over to the business. Enjoy the broadcast. Good morning.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Order, members, order. Order, members. I have a communication. Honorable members, as you may be aware, the Statute Miscellaneous Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2018, was published on 10th April 2018 and read the first time on Wednesday, 18th April 2018. The bill, which is sponsored by the leader of Majority Party, contains amendment to 61 different statutes, among them Kenya Revenue Authority Act of 1995. The bill seeks to effect minor amendments to various acts that do not warrant publication of a separate bill. Honorable members, I wish to inform the House that I have received a letter from the leader of Majority Party requesting to withdraw the proposed amendments to the Kenya Revenue Authority Bill number 2 of 1995 from the bill. This implies that the bill will now proceed for second reading and other stages without making reference to the withdrawn statute. In this regards, honorable members, I direct that the amendments relating to the said statute be withdrawn from the bill forthwith. I also request that the Office of the Clerk of the National Assembly to publish a consolidated and detailed public advertisement seeking the views of the public on various aspects of the two statute miscellaneous bills. The House be accordingly informed. I thank you.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
On this particular one, I see Honorable Member for Marakwet East, Honorable Kangogo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a petition. I, the undersigned, on behalf of the members of Kenya National Union of Teachers and the members of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, KUPPET, through the attention of the House to the following. Number 1, Mr. Speaker, that Section 49 of the Labor Relations Act of 2007 provides for deduction of agency fees from unionizable employees covered by the collective agreements, that in October 2016, the Kenya National Union of Teachers and the Teachers Union signed a collective bargaining agreement, CBA 2017 to 2021, that the said collective bargaining agreement provides that teachers who are not affiliated to the Kenya National Union of Teachers or the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Teachers Education, KUPPET, would pay a monthly fee, referred to as agency fee, to enable them enjoy the new salary deal and other benefits effected by TSC from July 2016. That a copy of the CBA 2017 to 2021 was deposited in the Industrial Code, which clearly stated that NAT and the KUPPET would draw agency fees from teachers who are not members of NAT or KUPPET. The Teachers Service Commission has failed to deduct the said agency fee as required in the said CBA. That efforts to resolve the matter have been futile, and that the issue in respect to which this petition made is not pending before any court of law or constitutional or a legal body. Mr. Speaker, therefore, your humble petitioners pray that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee of Labor and Social Welfare, inquire into the matter, causes the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection to cancel the agency fee, to effect the deductions from the non-union teachers who are already benefiting from the CBA, and make any other order or direction that deems fit in the circumstance of the matter. And your petitioners will ever pray. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Very well, that one is so committed to the relevant committee. Maybe I'll give just a few members, 2 or 3. Let's start with
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, NAT and KUPPET now are not even receiving their annual deductions, Mr. Speaker, from TSC. There is, this country wants to kill political parties. They want to kill these organizations which fight for the rights of workers, Mr. Speaker. Now, we are going to become a monologue society, Mr. Speaker, that's going to speak to themselves only, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I support and I want to congratulate Honorable Bowen, as usual, Mr. Speaker. And if his petition goes through in the appeal court, Mr. Speaker, based on this petition, the people of Marquette East should bring him back to this House, Mr. Speaker. I support.
I rise to support the petition by Honorable Bowen and thank him very much for having talked on behalf of all the unions in this country. Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with this Parliament, holistically so, every member, to actually come and look at what the unions are going throughout the country. The Labor Relations Act was created by this Parliament to protect both the workers and the worker organizations together with employers. But today, the Labor Relations Act is not being respected by the employers. Unlike truly Honorable Juneta has put it, the House, I want to draw your attention to the fact that it's like the unions want to be killed. And the unions are the greatest friends of government. In 1952, when we had the struggle for independence and all the political party leaders were imprisoned, it is the trade unions that took up the mantle to struggle for independence until when the state of emergency was lifted later on and the politicians came back. So I want to plead with the House to look into this petition, the relevant committee, and see that the unions, one, they get their monthly subscriptions, because currently unions are suffering, especially the teacher unions. It takes more than even 4 weeks when the deductions have been done for them to receive their monies. And these unions are now suffering, they are closing doors, and they are now even relieving some of their employers. Agency fee is recognized by the UN Convention, and it was adopted by the Kenyan government through an act of parliament, and it is not punitive. The agency fee simply talks about that, yes, the unions have struggled and have negotiated for a given group of workers. But there are those, Mr. Speaker, who are not members of the union. So they are supposed to pay agency fee, which will not be above the normal union dues. So it is the same as the normal union dues or below. This goes a long way to help the unions in arbitration, in representation, and in lobbying activities for those workers. So it's not a punitive thing, and if any worker is overcommitted, there's a provision that it's not deducted until later on when he's able to have the ability for deductions. So with those many remarks, I want to ask the relevant committee and the parliamentarians to help the unions in Kenya so that they don't die. Today, Mr. Speaker, as I finalize, the amendments coming even want to gag the unions further. I would plead with the House to look at the fate of the trade unions in Kenya. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, Honorable Dr. Pukose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to support Honorable Bowen's petition. This is a very important petition, Mr. Speaker, that we should be able to protect our unions within our country. Mr. Speaker, I think it is only Parliament that is not thinking about forming a union, but I think it's a right thing, because it is only Parliament that some of the basic rights, such as even the right to have house allowance, is not enshrined in your contract. Mr. Speaker, all other state officers get house allowance. How come members of Parliament even don't get house allowance? And I think it's a right time now that even Parliament should think of a union. The other day, Otwoli talked of a union for police, which I think is in the right direction. And therefore, I think it is it's criminal. It borders on criminality for the union to be denied their dues from the members. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this petition.
Okay. I am seeing no member who's placed an intervention slot, because that's where I'm supposed to pick from, but His Honorable Mabonga Mwambu of Bumula interested in speaking to this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish also to add my voice on this important petition from Honorable Poen. Interestingly, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the history of the unions, they have done a lot to this country and even to other countries. They are through unions that even they bargain the working environment of a worker. They bargain even their salaries. They bargain even whenever they have issues of sacking of a worker. The union is always there to definitely stand in and defend the worker. At times when you do not have a voice to speak on your behalf, just like what Dr. Bokosa has said, you realize that the employer is likely to frustrate you along the way. So my friend Boen has brought a very important issue to the House, and this is the only House whereby actually we can stand in and defend the members or the officials of the unions who are suffering outside there. When you meet the officials, especially the Kupet and the Nats who are struggling right now even to get their salaries, some of them are even begging what to eat. Mr. Speaker, it's very important that this House takes this petition very serious and ensure that the unions, regardless of what they are going through right now, the committee that is involved must come up with a structured way of dealing with unions without even affecting more unions that are along with other issues which are suffering. Because more unions will come on the way, not only teachers. You will find that what Court 2 Sector was proposing the other day, how many police officers are dying and they have nobody who can speak on their behalf. When a spokesperson of a police officer comes in, he will only be defending the employer. He will not even defending the rights of the police officers who are suffering in the field. So this is a very important petition, and I request that the honorable member supports this so that we safeguard the interest of the employees. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Maybe lastly, let's hear also the other gender. Let's have Mboko Hamis. Mboko Hamis, not Omboko. Mboko Hamis Mishi. I don't know why your gadget is not working.
It's
Yes.
working now, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I also want to add my voice to support Honorable Bowen Kegong for this petition. Mr. Speaker, this petition is a very important petition, Mr. Speaker. You can understand, Mr. Speaker, the employees of this country, be it the medical personnel, be it teachers, be it lecturers, they have so many grievances, Mr. Speaker. And for them to get solution for all these grievances, Mr. Speaker, they need to have a platform. And the platform is the union, Mr. Speaker. Without this union, Mr. Speaker, there could be so many rights which could be denied for these workers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this union have really assisted so many workers. You can imagine right now, we have even union for the security guards. The home guards, they also have union. The home maids also, they have union, Mr. Speaker. We need to support this petition because it is a very good petition. We need to empower the union, in fact, so that they can execute their work diligently, Mr. Speaker. Without having this union, we will not have a platform for communication, arbitration, and even to solve problems which have been encountered by employees, Mr. Speaker. I want to support strongly on this petition, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Very well. Honorable Sankok, of course, I'm not going to give you an opportunity. You know, yesterday you were found behaving in not so... And what was it about, by the way, Honorable Sankok? Because I'm told you brought live animals into the National Assembly, thereby causing inconvenience to many members. Maybe you'd speak to that one only, not even to this particular one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and let me take this early opportunity. If I caused some inconvenience, I want to apologize to the administration of Parliament together with members of Parliament. But Mr. Speaker, this was the first goat to enter Parliament, and it was unfortunate that
what was
it,
the goat
it
coming to do in
escaped.
Parliament?
It escaped. That is why it was running around. It was running around. And the issue was that there was a ranger, a game warden from a Badea range, who saw a person with disability being left inside the bus so that the rest can go and enjoy the scenery of watching Chania Falls. So the ranger decided to carry this little girl from Joyland, Kisumu, to carry her on his back. So she carried the lady on his back to the top of Abandea ranges so that he can also enjoy. And you know, Mr. Speaker,
So what was
all
the
throughout my life, as I fight for the rights of persons with disability, I don't only punish or rebuke those who infringe into the rights of persons with disability. I also reward those who assist us in achieving those rights. So when that ranger, when that warden was actually, his story was circulating in social media, Ifikia Sangok. So when I saw that one, I decided to reward him. And the only thing I can reward him with was to give him a goat for soup so that he can regain more energy to carry more children with disability up the...
Why then did you bring it to Parliament? Why did you take it to Abadeas?
Now the hashtag have changed. Ifikie Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta for state commendation. Ifikie the United Nations also for commendation on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Mr. Speaker, that was the reason. And I really apologize if I caused some inconvenience. But I know they enjoyed it because all of them were looking through their windows when the goat was running around. So I think they enjoyed also the scenery of seeing.
Yes, but next time it would be more convenient to take the goat to a more familiar surrounding, which is most likely therefore going to be Abadeas.
I think that is why it was making a lot of noise.
Thank you very much.
It was unfamiliar.
Order.
Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Machogu.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Member Services and Facilities on improvement of services and facilities laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, April 24, 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Very well. Next order.
Number 7, statements. Order number 8, motion. Establishment of programs and interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services.
Order, members. On this particular one, the motion, anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, concerned that Kenya's mental health policy estimates about 25% of outpatients and about 40% of inpatients suffer from mental health conditions, with most frequent diagnosis of mental illness made in general hospital setting being depression, substance abuse, stress, and anxiety disorders. Deeply concerned that the current worrying trend of increased domestic violence among Kenyan families has resulted in suicides, deaths, injuries, psychological trauma, orphaned and unstable children, noting that prevalence of the mental disorder may be attributed to the noted cases of suicide, homicide, and violence at household level, further noting that despite the strategies and guidelines that the government has put in place towards achieving higher standard of mental health, prevalence of health disorders remain high. This House urges the government to urgently establish programs and interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services among individual families and communities to mitigate effects of mental disorder. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of our contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Yes, the minority whip. What is your point of order? And what is out of order?
Yeah, no, Mr. Speaker, I wanted...
And Mr. Speaker, the minister in charge of that docket and his PSS and those 15 governors are just showcasing some items. In Kakamega, Mr. Speaker, there must be a priority in this country, Mr. Speaker. Imagine the governor of Tana River, Speaker, the worst hit county, over 15 villages are submarined. So I think this matter Honorable Junet is the whip. You can go and do a motion, and the Speaker will give you time this afternoon to come and discuss it. Unfortunately, you know, Honorable Junet, you have to follow some protocol. Your boss is, your party leader is currently addressing that conference. So you have to be very careful. Knowing your party, you might lose your seat. You know, when Baba is talking, you are not supposed to say anything contrary to what Baba is saying in Kakamega. So in fact, I'm just allowing you. Please be very careful. You are not in Jubilee or Wiper, where there is a serious democracy. After you leave the chamber, you might find your office locked.
Well, now, before even, I do not know why Honorable Junet really wants to speak on this. There are many avenues of discussing that. If you really wish, you can do it under Article number 33, Standing Order 33. You can seek for an adjournment on a matter of urgent national importance. You can do the 0 hour under Standing Order 43. There are many avenues. What I have a problem with is when you speak like you have a point of order, you press your intervention, and then when I try and look at it, I do not find it, I find it frivolous. The substance may not be frivolous, but the kind of, the formula you use to get that particular issue is really not proper. So we must always address the House properly. I do not know. Is it that you want to react with, to what Honorable Duale has said? Surely he says that you should have listened to the TV first before making this, but I don't even think that is proper itself. So you see, you can proceed without having to listen to any TV or radio or whatever else. You have a right to speak, but speak to this House in a proper manner. So what is it, Junet?
Mr. Speaker, first I want to thank you for your guidance on the matter, Mr. Speaker. We will follow, as you said, the Standing Order number 33. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to put to the attention of the Majority Leader, Mr. Speaker, that when you are in this House, Mr. Speaker, you are insulated from what other parties are saying outside the House, Mr. Speaker. We have come here to speak as members.
Just hold on there, Honorable Junet, so that you don't mislead yourself. You are only legally insulated.
Yes.
Politically, I'm not so sure, but proceed anyway.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we are both legally and politically insulated, Mr. Speaker. This is 2018, Mr. Speaker.
The second one, I'm not so sure.
And under the new spirit of the handshake, Mr. Speaker,
yes,
the insulation has gone even higher,
yes,
Mr. Speaker. Now we are even more insulated, Mr. Speaker, because now it looks like everybody can say what he thinks. Mr. Speaker, I was raising this matter just to put it to your attention, and you have given directions, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, the Majority Leader says that he was invited to speak tomorrow there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the program, Mr. Speaker, they have written the Majority Leader's name in small letters, Mr. Speaker. That tells you how small he is in devolution, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure if he went there, I'm sure they will have given him back row seat, Mr. Speaker. He can't sit at the front, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, devolution is the soul of the new constitution, Mr. Speaker. And it's under siege, Mr. Speaker. It's under siege, the way the former commissioner said. So, Mr. Speaker, I will write under Article 30, Standing at 33 and seek for your indulgence so that we can discuss devolution at the time when others also are discussing in the country, Mr. Speaker. We don't need to discuss it when they are finished on Thursday, tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay, that's really up to you, honorable members. These are facilities that are available to members. But what is also not true, because I have to really put records straight, what is not true is that, that the Council of Governors have been slighting this House. I know many times they have invited the Speaker. I know many times the Speaker has participated in some of their meetings. And as the leader of Majority Party has stated, he was invited himself, whether in capital letters or in small letters. If the minority have not been invited, that is something that we are willing to discuss, yes. But I can assure you, and you know, when Honorable Ashiali spoke and said the members of Parliament were not invited, sometimes it's a bit better when we are a bit more specific. We should be talking about members of National Assembly because the senators are participating there very seriously. So these are issues that we really don't need to. If you want to speak to it, you have your avenues, proceed and do it. It's open to any member. All right, so we go to the next order, please.
Order number 9, motion. Establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency.
Now, on this particular one, the debate is resuming after, and the balance of time available to members is 45 minutes. I will also say that I received a letter from the mover of this particular motion, Honorable Mother Wangari, asking us to adjourn this particular debate because she was absent. But I did not think that that was going to be proper, because once a motion has been introduced to the House, it becomes a property of the members. The 45 minutes that is remaining, at least 35 belong to members, 35. What is only available to her is the 45 and the 10 minutes that she's allowed to reply. Now, that we can discuss that, but the issue of us adjourning this particular motion on the basis of the fact that she's not going to be there is not going to be allowed. I'm not going to allow that, so the motion will proceed. And for future reference, if members are not available to even respond, you can pinpoint one of the members to reply on your behalf, so that we can move in an orderly manner. So let's proceed, honorable members. We have 45 minutes. And I do not know if all these members want to speak to this particular one. So we will go in the order of which they have placed their request. Honorable Chachu Ganya, member for North Hor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this motion. And I fully support this motion, which is on the establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency in our republic. Mr. Speaker, sir, in supporting this motion, I want to commend Honorable Martha Wangari, MP for Gilgil, for this very timely and relevant motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, these motions, once fully implemented, it will ensure full implementation of the Kenya Citizens and Foreign Nationals Engagement Services Act that we passed in this House in 2011. Mr. Speaker, sir, this vital document called birth certificate enables Kenyans to acquire many vital documents. Mr. Speaker, sir, you need a birth certificate to get an ID card in this country, to open a bank account, to get a passport, even for children to register for their national examinations, among many others. Mr. Speaker, sir, also this document, such as an ID, which you can only acquire once you have a birth certificate, enables Kenyans to benefit from many government programs and services, such as social protection programs, whereby there's cash transfers to orphans, Wajir, and others should really be considered to have even more centers if these Kenyans, like other Kenyans, are going to benefit from these government programs. Mr. Speaker, sir, this document, birth certificate or ID card, is not a privilege. It's not a favor. It's a right for every Kenyan. And this government and our governments have a duty to provide this service to our citizens. Mr. Speaker, sir, in other parts of the world, and I was fortunate enough to live in the US for 8 years where I went to school. Mr. Speaker, sir, even in very small villages, you can go into offices and you can get these vital documents. Mr. Speaker, sir, you actually apply through postal service for your passport. You don't have to go to Washington, D.C. or any of those big cities for you to acquire those very vital documents. Mr. Speaker, it is possible even to have those kind of programs in this country. Of course, we have a much smaller economy, and we cannot say we can really be able to gain the kind of services that they're able to provide to their citizens, but still we can do better, Mr. Speaker, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, in particular, those of us who live along the borders, these porous borders, whether it's Kenya-Ethiopian border, whether it's Somalia border, or Southern Sudan border. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are highly marginalized because of these foreigners who come to this country. Even our people are treated as foreigners. And it's become very, very difficult for Kenyans who live along these borders to acquire these documents. Mr. Speaker, sir, once this motion is passed, I strongly encourage our committee implementation to ensure that this service is available to Kenyans in 6 months. Mr. Speaker, sir, more than that, the National Assembly should provide enough budget for us to ensure that whatever we have agreed and passed in this House, like establishment of these centers in every constituency, is fully funded and operationalized. I support, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to speak on this very important motion, Mr. Speaker, on establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency. Mr. Speaker, civil registration is not only about birth certificates, and Kenya has come a long way with this. There's a time this was only obtainable at Sharia House in Nairobi, and you find long queues, and eventually it was devolved to some districts. And today, it is mostly in many county headquarters in the country. But recently, Mr. Speaker, the government encouraged through primary schools that all children in schools be equipped with a birth certificate. Ordinarily, the birth certificate is obtained as soon as a child is born, and especially if they are born in a hospital. The forms are available for registration, the child is registered at birth, but there's a huge backlog of Kenyans who have not attained this particular document over a long time. And recently, when the Minister of Education and the Minister of Internal Security started this mass registration, Kenyans have gone through challenges such that they have to go and camp at county headquarters for days and days. And within no time, Mr. Speaker, brokers emerged and started to assist some of these people who had covered a long distance, and in fact started charging some fee, 500 shillings and even 1,000 shillings, and some cases 1,500 shillings, of which is an illegality, and they were taking advantage of vulnerable Kenyans who are under pressure to present this document urgently at the schools. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the moment a schoolmaster in a village sends out children away for a document, the parents will go to a great extent to make sure they acquire this document. Hence the need, first of all, to have these registration centers devolved to every constituency, such that even the member of parliament can be involved in oversighting it, and that with the assistance of the chiefs and any other administrators on the grassroots, this document can be acquired easily by Kenyans. In fact, in some places, people are being asked for a small bribe to be able to get this document. And in other centers where people have camped for days awaiting for this particular document, the equipment for registration are not working, the computer is not working. In the case of Kitui, the Honorable Charity Ngilu had to give assistance from our own office by surrendering the county equipment to the registration bureau, so that they can utilize to be able to serve Kenyans first. And therefore, I want to say that the government, first of all, was not ready for this order they gave. They had not allocated the necessary resources, and Kenyans found themselves in a difficult situation. And for that matter, Mr. Speaker, it is important that these registration centers be in every constituency, and possibly in where there are large constituencies. Like in the case of Makueni constituency, have 7 wards, which are quite huge. And the logistics of getting to the headquarter of one district, because in Makueni have 3 districts, is quite a challenge. And therefore, not only, although a lot of constituencies in Kenya are based on districts, there are other constituencies which have several districts in them, just like the case of Makueni constituency. And even there be the constituency headquarter be one of the areas this registration center can be, Mr. Speaker. It will also be prudent if it can go by districts, and even later on further push it down to the wards, such that we can have a lot of Kenyans, as many Kenyans as possible, as many young children as possible, be registered, whether there is an order through the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Education or not, because this is a very important document. It's a primary document for one to be able to get an ID card, for one to participate in the standard aid examinations, for a passport, among others. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Let's have Honorable Shuri Omar, member from Balambala.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I wish to support the establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency. To be honest, these are vital documents that Kenyans do need. And unfortunately, it's not easily available in our constituencies, and the people we represent have a lot of difficulties in getting this document. If I may give an example, they have to travel to Garissa town, and at times there's police roadblocks, and when they don't have the vital document, they end up being arrested and being sent back to the villages. So, Mr. Speaker, I 100% support the formation or the establishment of these offices so that it can reduce the hardship of our people. And if possible, I'll urge this House to provide enough money for these centers and make sure that it is fully constituted at the shortest time possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
We shall have the Honorable Iringo Kubai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. And Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I say I supported this motion fully in as far as the decentralization of these services which are supposed to be offered by the government to the constituency levels, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the spirit of devolution is here with us, and we should embrace it fully, especially in all spheres, and this one is no exception, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in the same spirit, we need to have services brought to the people as nearest as possible, and therefore, the provision of these essential documents and the registration certificate, registration of these documents is concerned, Mr. Speaker, it is very vital and critical that somebody, when one wants to get a birth certificate, it does not take time, it does not cost much, and it must be efficient enough for one to get a certificate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and death certificates equally so, we need them in as much the same breath as the birth certificates, Mr. And time to get these particular documents, Mr. Speaker. Land registration centers, Mr. Speaker. There are those people who travel, especially in my county in Meru. They travel over 80 and 100 kilometers to go to Meru to go for their title deeds, Mr. Speaker. Whereas we have got offices which can be used to give these services at as close as every sub-county. Mr. Speaker, I keep on wondering why, as a government, we can spend a lot of money to employ so many people, especially the IEBC, and take even voter registration officers to the villages. We take voter registration to the market centers, bus stages. We camp in each and every roundabout so that we can register voters. Why don't we use the same energy and breath and resources to go and take these vital documents to the people who require them? The other day, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education said that for every child to be registered in a school, one should have a birth certificate. We know very well in Kenya, we have got so many children who are born even at home, and so many parents are ignorant, they don't know about that certificate, Mr. Speaker. This queuing of collecting these birth certificates has shown in this country we are very far away from giving the necessary services to our people by not opening enough registration centers for these vital documents. As we talk, there are parents who are wondering when they will get this certificate, Mr. Speaker. You will find that a whole sub-county or the whole county, we have got 5 or 10 or even less registration officers. And when you have got a queue of almost 1,000 people waiting for that document, I know you don't do even much. You do very little. And this is where corruption creeps in. The officers will find that the people they are dealing with are so many, and therefore they will try to capitalize on that hunch to get the document, and that's where corruption comes in. And whoever pays the token or the little fee the officers will ask is the one who will get that one. Mr. Speaker, to carve this one, to remove this out of this bad habit in our society, Mr. Speaker, we need at least every sub-county to have all the offices as pertains to the services to our people. If we have got the office of the DCC, we have got the office of the MP, we have the office of the OCS and the OSPD, let us have all the other graduated offices in the government systems into the same dockets so that our people can get their services as close as possible, and when they need them, they get the services. Mr. Speaker, before I conclude, I'm wondering where our female members are. And you know, Mr. Speaker, they are talking of gender, two-thirds gender rule. How are we going to achieve it? If we give them this house, they will all walk out and we'll have nobody in this house. So we better know where they are, and if we don't see them participating fully in the activities of this house, let them forget the two-thirds gender rule. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Iringo, you will see where they are with the next contributor, the Honorable Boko Kamisi, member for Likon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak on this motion, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate Mheshimiwa Martha Wangare for this noble motion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, civil registration being the system by which a government records officially vital events of its citizens and residents in proper registry, Mr. Speaker. Birth certificate is one of the mandatory documents which any Kenyan need to have, Mr. Speaker. Right now, Mr. Speaker, you cannot acquire a passport if you don't have a birth certificate. You can't acquire an identification card if you don't have a birth certificate, Mr. Speaker. And there are other official documents which you cannot acquire without having a birth certificate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are having so many challenges in accessing the center so that we can acquire this document, Mr. Speaker. If you look on the areas from semi-arid and arid areas, and especially now where we have heavy rains, you can imagine people who travel long distances to reach the centers where they can acquire this birth certificate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the personnel in these centers are very few. The equipments are very few, Mr. Speaker, and even the stationery are very few, Mr. Speaker. You can imagine, Mr. Speaker, the applicants can go apply for this birth certificate and they can stay for a month without even getting response on that birth certificate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have been doing this through the sectoral level, Mr. Speaker, but I think we can also effect this through the health level, Mr. Speaker. If a woman gives birth in an hospital, and maybe we can look on the 4-level hospital and the 5th level hospital, whereby one can start the processes just at the hospital so that it can be effective even before he leaves that hospital, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, right now in our country, there are still women who give birth at home through the care of traditional birth attendants, Mr. Speaker, and they are not aware that they need to get a notification from the chief's office or the sub-chief office, Mr. Speaker. We also need to do some awareness program, outreach program, Mr. Speaker, so that our women can be educated, they can be sensitized, so that anytime they give birth at home, they can go to the chief's office or the sub-chief office and they do some notification so that the processes can be effected, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a member of parliament, Mr. Speaker, one of my role is about security. And I think birth certificate registration is also part of the security measure. Mr. Speaker, I think we can request as member of parliament if we can be added some allocation, little allocation in our allocation of the CDA fund so that we can put some officers at our constituencies, we get some few personnel, and we can also get some volunteers so that these processes can be effective to our people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because of the small capacity these centers have, Mr. Speaker, there is a window of corruption, Mr. Speaker. Each and every time people come to our offices, they tell you, Mheshimiwa, you need to give me 2,000 because I want to do birth certificate for my daughter or my son, Mr. Speaker. And you ask, why are you paying all that money? They tell you, Mheshimiwa, if you pay 2,000, you can get it for a single day. If you pay 1,000, you get it for 2 days. And if you don't pay, you just pay the official amount required, then you can stay for 3 weeks. Sometimes you can even stay for 1 month without getting that document, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are living below $1 per day. A big percentage of Kenyans, maybe 70 and above, they are very poor, Mr. Speaker. They cannot afford. You can imagine a family of 7 children. How much are they going to pay to get this certificate, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, these processes does not only does not only assist so that you can get other official certificate, it can also assist the government to have proper planning, especially in terms of health facilities, Mr. Speaker. I want to support this motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Very well, Honorable Mishi. Honorable members, I wish to recognize the presence of pupils from Losidan Primary School, from Laisamis constituency in Marsabit County, who are in the public gallery. I want them to feel welcome to the House. I want to give this opportunity to the Honorable Pukose, who is right at the top of the list.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii ili niweze kuchangia huu mswada. Bwana Spika, cheti cha kusaliwa na kitambulisho ni vitu muhimu, na unapata kwamba Bwana Spika, mimi nakumbuka wakati nikipata kitambulisho, wakati huo tulikuwa tunapewa kwa headquarters ya district, ya wilaya. Na sahizi Bwana Spika, ili upate kitambulisho, inabidi baada ya wale wanaoandikisha watume hizo tarakilishi siende Nairobi, alafu baada ya ikifika Nairobi ndio iweze kuletwa. Na hiyo inachukua muda mrefu. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia kule kwenye constituency, unapata kwamba hata kuna watu wengine ambao kuja kwa headquarters ya constituency huwa ni jambo gumu sana. Kwa hivyo nina hii mswada ambayo inasema kwamba kitambulisho na cheti cha kusaliwa iweze kupeanwa katika constituency ama sub county. Nafikiri ni jambo muhimu. Ijapokuwa tunaikosoa kwa sababu inasema urges badala ya kusema resolves. Kwa sababu
Honorable Wangari, I'm in total support for these services to be devolved, because now we are devolving everything, the services to be devolved to sub-counties to make it easy for our people in this Republic of Kenya. Therefore, I stand here to support this motion by saying let every sub-county have a registration center. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
The Honorable Yusuf Haji, member for Mandera West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Speaker. I stand to support this motion. It is actually very timely. For example, recently when schools, the Minister of Education said that all students or pupils in the primary schools should be registered, should have birth certificates before they are registered. There was serious crisis in some of the constituencies like where I come from, Mandera West. This is because there is no registration center there. And the next registration center, which is Mandera Town, is 300 kilometers. That's a rough road. And what happened is that some of these pastoralists, even they are very far from where the school is. They leave their children in boarding school and go away with their animals to go and search for pasture and water. And then by the time the information reaches that their son or daughter is supposed to be registered or to have a certificate, is a long time. And then the person travels all the way from that pastoralist area to the school and get the right information. And then to go from there to where these documents are being issued, 300 kilometers away from there, is another nightmare. This created a cartel of people who collect names and the photocopies of ID cards and travel with those documents to Mandera, which is 300 kilometers from Takaba, where is the headquarters of the sub-county. That was costing about 3,500 shillings per child to get that birth certificate and then to bring to the school. Assuming, as my friend Honorable Adagala just said, that we have 10 children in that household to get those documents, and each of them is to pay 3,500 shillings. That itself is a project of its own, which requires a donor funding. Yeah? It requires a donor funding. So, having these documents, I think, is not a privilege, it's a right. Every Kenyan, wherever he's born, whether he's born in the pastoral homestead or in the hospital or wherever he or she is born, must be issued with these documents. So these bureaucratic activities or these situations where the registration officers and all those are not available has caused people a lot of problem. Recently, I went to the ministry headquarters in order to try to see how that issue was to be solved. And what I was told is that there is even an embargo on employment of registration officers by the Treasury, and therefore they can do nothing about it. The whole of Mandera County should have only one registration officer. And just the other day, and even now, we are in the process of appropriating funds. Can we make sure that adequate funds are given so that these actual offices are established at that level? Actually, it is now easier. I mean, it is more difficult to get a birth certificate now than when I was getting some 50 years ago. Because some 50 years ago, I was a student of Wajir Secondary School, and I applied it, filled a form and posted it. And after 3 weeks, I got my birth certificate by poster while I was seated there. And I think I paid less than a shilling or something of that nature. But today, with this era of IT and what have you, I don't know what to say. Finally, I think in the long run, we should even recommend that this to go to locational levels. Other chiefs, the chiefs can initiate, the sub-chiefs can initiate, so that by the time it reaches at sub-county level, where the registration officer is seated, then the document can easily be available. I hereby stand to support this, and I say it is very timely, and thank Mheshimiwa Martha, who has brought up this motion very sincerely. I support this motion. Thank you.
The Honorable Atandi, member for Alep.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important motion. And because we know that, Mr. Speaker, there are some Kenyans who are even above aged between 70 and 80 who do not own ID cards. And recently, when we were involved in the electioneering processes, we went to ask our people to come out in numbers and vote, and we realized that there are many people who do not own ID cards. And Mr. Speaker, this is very shameful, considering that, Mr. Speaker, even the budget estimates are prepared on the basis of the number of Kenyans who are registered. It therefore means, Mr. Speaker, that possibly there are some sections of this country that are not developed because the Kenyans who live there are not considered as part of this country in the area of budgets. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a very important motion. And sometimes I ask myself, why does the government allow Kenyans to exist in this country without these documents? We know the importance of these documents. For instance, for the youths, you really cannot access things like youth funds if you do not if you are not registered. If you do not have an ID card, that kid cannot be registered. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important motion, and I think the government officers, really, you should not wait for Parliament to discuss some of these things before you can implement. We want Kenyans to be properly registered, so that if you are a Kenyan, you are dignified. You don't have an ID, you are existing like you do not live. So for the dignity of Kenyans, I think this is very important, and we would like the government to move with speed and ensure that Kenyans can access registration services. If you look at, for instance, Siaya district or Siaya sub-county, with 3 constituencies, we have only one registration center. So 2 constituencies really they have to come all the way to Siaya, and this is a large section of this country. So it makes the process very cumbersome. That's why you find people who are aged 80, 70, they are not registered. So I think the government needs to move with speed. And I think that the process also needs to be, we need to make it simple, so that it can be done even in each sub-location. Still, you find that even if it is in the headquarters of your constituency, That again is still very, very far for people who live in the primitive areas. So I would like to call upon the government to move with speed so that Kenyans can be able to enjoy and live in dignity as Kenyans, holding these documents and being able to use them to access services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Very well. We shall have the Honorable Tutoe Cameron, member for Mogotio.
Thank you very much, Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this very important bill. Establishing the civil registration centers in constituencies is so important. As has been mentioned by our my fellow colleagues here, that our people really been suffering trying to access this service, especially traveling long distances. In Mogotio constituency, we have to go to the neighboring constituency called Ravine, and people spend days waiting for service, especially to register the births, to get birth certificates for pupils in primary schools. In fact, this particular motion, I'd like to say that it has come at the right time. I want to congratulate Honorable Mother Wangari for this particular motion and say that it will go a long way to assisting Kenyans to access services at the nearest point.
That our citizens and people have the relevant documentations in terms of identity cards, birth certificates, and even marriage certificates. Mr. Speaker, undocumented citizens is a major cause of insecurity. And especially where I come from in a constituency like Mathare, and I'm sure this applies to many constituencies in many parts of the country, it is important that the government takes this very seriously. We've talked about and we've heard about people who live in porous borders in northeastern and other places, so that this becomes a national security issue. It is a national and very important issue that our people are documented. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution contemplates that in order to be able to exercise your voting rights, you need to be able to have an identity card. We've just come from an election, and it is important that we do not wait until the next election for us to be able to empower our young people to be able to participate in the process of governance. And this under Article 1, where we exercise our sovereignty directly by electing our representatives, we will be disenfranchising a lot of Kenyans who do not have documentation. Mr. Speaker, there are other issues also that we need to look at. There is recently a new law or directive that has been given that all marriages must be registered. And it is in fact now criminal that anybody should be existing or coexisting in any marriage if that marriage is not registered. There is no reason why we cannot amalgamate the registries of birth, the registrar of person, and the registry of marriage, so we have one single document. When you apply, there is one single document that you get, and that this should be able to be digitized and the biometrics taken. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, one of the big four agendas of the government currently is manufacturing, creating jobs for the youth. This cannot be able to be achieved if our young people do not have identity cards, and it is therefore important that we take this exercise very seriously. Otherwise, one of these big four agendas will only benefit people who are already in other classes. I want to also bring to the attention, Mr. Speaker, that there is a little-known piece of legislation called the Kenya Citizens Foreign National Management Services Act. This act already contemplates that that particular agency should be able to devolve and to be able to get agents, and in this case constituencies, to be able to establish civil registration centers. So I want to urge that the mover of this motion should move with speed to look at this particular legislation so that we see which are the relevant areas in which we will be able to amend so that we are able to get these relevant documents to the people. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion, and I urge that funds be placed and funds be availed so that we are able to document and get our citizens and our people. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Honorable members, I would like to just inform you that there's a lot of interest in this particular motion, but we had only 45 minutes remaining on this, and we've run the course of those 45 minutes. You will notice that I try to distribute the slots for speaking to as many regions across the country as we could. But we've run the gauntlet of the time that we had. It is therefore now time for me to call on the mover to reply. And I'm informed that the mover had nominated the Honorable Kibinga to do that on her behalf. The Honorable Kibinga, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The correct pronunciation of my name is Kabinga. And if that's difficult, you can call me Wadayo. Wadayo means peace.
It is noted. It's just that the person who had noted your name down had put the I instead of the A. I think Kabinga is not too difficult to do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I come from where we have the best lice in Africa. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I arise on behalf of my colleague, Honorable Martha Wangari, to reply on this very important motion, Mr. Speaker. And as I do so, I want to thank the many members who have contributed to this very important motion, Mr. Speaker, and especially now that it's coming at a time when our people across the country are struggling with the registration of their children to enable them to continue with their education in our schools, Mr. Speaker. As we are aware, most of the centers that are in place today were designed in the old days when the population badge that we are witnessing today was not in place, Mr. Speaker. And this is why we're having queues and that for constituencies that have more than one sub-county, we have these centers in those sub-counties so that they also benefit. I'm aware, Mr. Speaker, that there are some constituencies that are so large that they have more than one sub-county, and it's only fair, as we talk about having these centers in constituencies, that we also have them in these sub-counties, Mr. Speaker. We are aware of the challenges that we have with our infrastructure, and I want to thank the government that is doing its best to improve on infrastructure so that our centers can be easily accessed by our people, Mr. Speaker, and therefore as we do so, as we put effort in our infrastructure, we would want the government to move with speed to create these centers in all the constituencies and relevant sub-counties where we have two in constituencies, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to reply.
Very well. Members, for obvious reasons, will not move to the next action in this. I will direct that we move to the next order, to the next motion.
Order number 10, motion. Creation of water collection and storage management systems in the cities and major towns in Kenya.
The Honorable George Kariuki.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to move the following motion. That aware that the fourth schedule of the Constitution provides for the protection of environment and natural resources, and in particular water protection, securing sufficient residual water, among others, by the national government. Further aware that the abundant water during rainy seasons goes to waste, deeply concerned over destructive nature of the said excess water on roads, buildings, and other infrastructure, and which many at times has resulted in loss of lives and properties in the cities, cognizant of the fact that during dry periods, there's always rationing of water due to low water levels in the reservoirs that serve cities and towns. This House urges the government to consider creating rainwater collection and storage management systems in the cities and major towns in Kenya. Honorable Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity and give a brief summary on the motion and state that, one, The UN has ranked Kenya as having one of the lowest water replenishment rates in the world. The renewable water resource per capita is at 647 meters cubic per capita per annum, which is far below 1,000 cubic meters. Globally, a country is categorized as water-stressed if its annual renewable fresh water supplies are between 1,000 and 1,700 cubic meters per capita, and water-scarce if its renewable fresh water supplies are less than 1,000 cubic meters per capita. Number two, according to the United Nations Environment Program, the amount of renewable water resources per capita in Kenya has been significantly increasing over the past 50 years and now falls below the scarcity line. Water touches nearly every aspect of development. It drives economic growth, supports healthy ecosystems, and is fundamental for life. And Mr. Speaker, you know, we've been talking about, the government has been talking about the big four. And we all agree that there's no way we can have, or we can be food sufficient, we can have sufficient food if we don't have water. We cannot have a healthy population if we don't have water, or if we don't take care of water and our environment. Mr. Speaker, we need to, as a country, manage the way or improve the way we manage our water collection. Let me continue, Mr. Speaker, to brief the House on the motion and say that this critical resource can harm as well as help. Water-related hazards, including floods, storms, and droughts, are responsible for 9 out of 10 natural disasters. Climate change is expected to increase this risk in addition to placing greater stress on water supplies. It has been documented, and we all know that during the El Nino, we faced a major crisis in this country. So during that period, that is 1997 to 2000, it costed this country 290 billion Kenya shillings to rehabilitate our infrastructure after it was destroyed during the El Nino rains. And right now, as a country, we know that the ongoing heavy rains in many parts of this country have led to loss of life, damage of property, destruction of crops, and loss of livestock. We know communication and infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, are damaged and disrupted, and at the same time, some economic activities have come to a standstill, or will come to a standstill. Mr. Speaker, sir, I was watching, I think it's yesterday, a clip circulating on social media of Sagana Bridge, just before you get to Sagana town, coming from Nairobi. And water is almost sweeping away that bridge. And so the ongoing heavy rains, if we don't take advantage and harvest this water or manage this water, we are going to lose a lot in terms of our infrastructure. And we know the government is spending a lot of money building our infrastructure, especially roads. And so when we get heavy rains, and rain is a blessing, Mr. Speaker, this infrastructure, or this money that we spend on infrastructure, will just go down the drain, because we'll have to come back and redo the same roads. So instead of moving forward, we'll be taking 2 steps forward and 1 backward, and we'll never be able to progress as a country. Let me continue briefing the House on this motion, Mr. Speaker, and say that although the occurrence of such extreme climate events is outside the country's control, it is possible to minimize their impacts through proper planning and investment. The combined effect of growing populations, rising income, and expanding cities will see demand for water rising exponentially, while supply becomes more erratic and uncertain. To avert a further water crisis, the country needs to seek alternative sources of water supply and reduce its reliance on conventional surface water schemes like dams and reservoirs. A recent approach in stormwater harvesting, which involves the correction of storage of rainfall runoff and storage of rainfall runoff in open ponds or aquifers. It's been identified as one alternative water resource and could supplement traditional urban water supplies. Mr. Speaker, as I come to a close of this, let me say that stormwater can improve water security and increase resilience to climate change in urban areas. It can also prevent frequent flooding and provide additional benefits to society. Mr. Speaker, when you travel outside, most of the times when we travel outside this country, just before you land, especially in the measures aimed at addressing issues related to stormwater or rainwater harvesting, water correction, and storage management systems. Rainwater is the primary source of water in agriculture. If managed successfully, stormwater or rainwater is an essential enabler for transforming Kenya into industrialized middle-income country as envisioned by Vision 2030. And as I said earlier, it also captures the government's Big Four agenda, where industrialization plays a key role. Mr. Speaker, I'll take, for example, the city of Nairobi. During the dry seasons, we experience a lot of dust because we do not have water to even plant trees, to do landscaping, to beautify our city, to plant grass, and therefore we end up with a very polluted environment, which also causes a lot of ailments. You will notice, Mr. Speaker, that during the dry seasons, almost everybody catches a cold because of the dust we gather. If we take advantage of the heavy rains, like we have now, and harvest this water, store it, and during the dry seasons, use this water to beautify our cities and major towns, we will end up with a very clean environment, we end up with a healthy population, and we end up with a well-fed population. Mr. Speaker, that is the motive of the purpose of this motion, so that we better the lives of our people, we improve the quality of life for our people, and we have a clean environment. Mr. Speaker, allow me before I ask Honorable Anthony Oruoch, the MP for Mathare, to second, allow me to move a little bit from this motion. And I come from a county called Kirinyaga. And it's unfortunate that I have to say this, but we had a very nasty incident. Those who have seen, those who have not seen, I will not talk about it. And I want to say that human dignity should be respected. Somebody sent me that same clip from London and told me, and wrote and said, Kenyans are nasty. And because I know a little about the Bible, I remembered, I hope I'll get 1 more minute. I remembered a verse in the Bible, that's Genesis 9 verse 22, where this old man, Noah, took some wine and he went naked. We were not told what made him remove his clothes, but nevertheless, he was naked, and one of his sons, called Canaan, went and told his brothers, you see, my dad is naked. But the other 2 boys did not entertain that. They, I still plead for 1 more minute, they took some clothing, went backwards, and covered their naked father. And so the father, when he realized what had happened, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers."
Honorable Karaoke, you need to move your motion. I'll give you 1 minute so that you can do what you need to do. The Bible, we will have another time another day. But just do what you need to do in the next 1 minute.
Thank you. I was just remaining with 1 second to finish that, what the Bible says. But he said, praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave to Shem. And therefore, I want to say that what happened yesterday is not acceptable in a modern society like ours. It was not acceptable even in the Bible days, and it will never be acceptable.
Karaoke, please move your motion.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I request Honorable Roach to second the motion. Thank you. I beg to move.
Very well. The Honorable Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to second the motion. It's a very important motion. Not only is it part of Vision 2030, which we all aspire as a nation to attain, it is also part of the Big Four. And more importantly for me, as Member of Parliament in Nairobi constituency, it was also part of the Big Five and the things that I promised would be the deliverables for me as a Member of Parliament in a Nairobi constituency. Mr. Speaker, it is not lost to anyone that this time of the year, the heavy rains that have not only caused havoc and destruction should be a cause for us to reflect and see what can we do as a nation to be able to harness this water and use it for purposes of being able to carry out agriculture not only in the rural areas, but especially in Nairobi, to be able to ensure that we are self-sustained in our demands for water as Nairobians. Mr. Speaker, there is the Water Act 2016, and I think the Water Act 2016 establishes what is called the Nairobi Water Harvesting and Storage Authority. This storage authority already contemplates that there shall be in place mechanisms by government, mechanisms and systems in place to ensure that we are able to create water reservoirs, we are able to create storage facilities, and we are able to ensure that every member who lives in Nairobi has decent and clean. Is the artificial shortage. I think there is also partly an artificial shortage of water that arises because of cartels. We have cartels at 2 levels. Cartels that ensure that we do not have water where we stay so that they can be able to supply us with water that we buy. I spend about 3,000 to 4,000 shillings to pay to Nairobi Water monthly as part of what they charge me for my consumption, and then spend another 20,000 in order to be able to pay water suppliers as a result of what sometimes I consider to be water shortage. There is a second problem about cartels, not really at that level, but people who try to access sewage water by using the sewage pipes in order to create car wash and other facilities. And so as we try to solve this problem, we may have to put systems in place to try and deal with this artificial siphoning of water. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, His Excellency the President said that the national government will avail 50 billion in order to be able to rehabilitate and put back the towns that are not yet attained city status, so that they may be able to put in place infrastructure and things in place to bring them to the level where the other major towns are. I wish that the government would be able to put a similar amount so that we are able to rehabilitate the infrastructure, especially sewage water treatment systems in Nairobi, in a manner that they may be able to serve us for another 50 years. We have a problem of sewage that are malfunctional, and I think that the cities of Nairobi, the city of Mombasa, the city of Nakuru, and possibly Kisumu should benefit from a government fund of a similar amount to be able to help us jumpstart the infrastructure in terms of our water sewage system, our sewage system, and other systems. We need, as I close, to be able to look at what other countries have been able to do, country like Israel, country like the United States. Water that we use every day is not watershed that should go into Nairobi River or to the Indian Ocean. We should have a facility where this water is harnessed, treated, and then put back into our system. And I look forward to those days when we used to drink water from the tap. So I support this motion. I think it is a motion that is very timely and especially will be useful for Nairobians and my constituency.
The Honorable Anthony Lwach, you need to second. I'll give you 20 seconds to second.
And therefore, with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I second this motion and I ask the House to adopt it and the government to place funds in support. Thank you.
Very well. Honorable members, I propose a question that, aware that the fourth schedule of the Constitution provides for the protection of the environment and natural resources, and in particular water protection, securing sufficient residual water, among others, by the national government, further aware that the existence of abundant water during rainy seasons goes to waste and collected, deeply concerned about the destructive nature of the said excess water on roads, buildings, and other infrastructure, including loss of lives in the cities and major towns, cognizant of the fact that during dry periods, there is always rationing of water due to low water levels in the reservoirs that serve the cities and major towns. This House urges the government to consider creating water collection and storage management systems in the cities and major towns in Kenya. I see interest from the Honorable Shamala Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support this motion. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, water is life. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights requires that state parties do recognize this right. The Water Act, as it is today, does not explicitly provide for the right to water and sanitation. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is the poorest in this country, and more specifically in the urban areas like Nairobi, that pay the most for water, between 10 to 25 times more. Needless to say, it is the women and young girls who suffer the most, because it is them who line up early in the morning to carry jerry cans of at least 20 kilograms. It has been established that this affects actually the health of young girls when they're forced to carry these huge jerry cans of water. I support this motion, Mr. Speaker, sir, and indeed, I think that it is crucial. With those few remarks, I support.
Very well. Shall we now have Honorable Osotsi Godfrey? Yes. Okay. He seems to have taken leave. Honorable Sonkok, you cannot take his chance. You will get your independent chance. But let's have Honorable Muri Fabian, member for Kangudo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I rise to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, water is a vital component, not only to our human body, and also, especially, everything we do for human life is water. We go to agriculture. Anything to do about agriculture is about water. Anything to do about industry is about water. Anything to do about cleaning is about water. So, Mr. Speaker, it is the high time the Kenya as a country, for it to grow, we have to realize the benefit of having a sustainable water, sustainable supply of water everywhere. Honorable Speaker, it has been happening in Kenya. When we get the present of rain from God, it comes like a history of disaster in this country. Our houses have been washed away, roads have been washed away, but we don't see the part of benefit of that water was being utilized. Mr. Speaker, we normally get rains at least a year once or 2 times. Mr. Speaker, it is the high time the government need to set funds on how to tame this water to be utilized in a proper ways for the help of the economy and people as a society. Mr. Speaker, we are living in Africa where our climate is good, we are having proper rains. When you compare our country climate and the countries in desert like UAE, country like Qatar, their cities are green. The water is being spread everywhere in the cities that you can say you don't have challenges of getting water or anything in manufacturing to use water. But come to our country, you get our cities, we don't have water. There are countries, the desert, they are going ahead even using canals to spread the water within the country. What about a city like Mombasa, where we have the ocean, but that water is not utilized? So, Mr. Speaker, I'm urging the government to move ahead and use the principles of integrated water resources management to be able to supply the Kenyan citizens with water. Mr. Speaker, it is true the Constitution 1010 bring the water to the function of a devolved government. But it's the high time we recognize the importance of water and we use it to every constituency. We should not say water is supposed to be only tamed to be used in cities. We come to constituencies where water is a challenge. Our people to get water, they use long distances, like logistic of mountain to look for the water. So it is the high time if we want this country to go far, to realize the benefit of our citizens having the water in every constituency. We should use this water should be tamed in every constituency for proper use for our people. Thank you. And Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I support this motion. Thank you.
Shall we now have Honorable Hurufo Order, member for Isiolo North?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, half of our country is affected by flood occasioned by torrential rains, which in the case of the Asal region of this country has come after 3 years of very severe drought. And therefore, harvesting this water will not only help us to protect infrastructure, but it will also help us to prepare ourselves for operation. And therefore, because that authority is not in place, that is partly the reason why we are finding ourselves in a situation where there is a lot of water causing a lot of destruction. Our roads are destroyed. Most parts of this county are no longer passable. Like in my own constituency, we had to do airdropping of food in places where a huge number of population have been cut off. And yesterday, we keep on losing lives as well also. And I would like also to take this opportunity to condole with 2 families in Oldonyiro who lost their loved one yesterday as a result of these rains. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, as a member of Committee on Implementation, I think once this House makes a resolution, a motion is passed, we need to follow it up and make sure that it is implemented. And I'm glad my chairman, through you, Mr. Chair, is just sitting across the aisle on the other side. And this is the frustration we have in that particular committee. We look at all the resolutions which are passed in the past parliament, 10th parliament, 11th parliament, which are very good provisions, calling upon the government to do certain things which are good for this country, but they are never implemented. And therefore, as we support this particular motion, I think it is important for us to make sure that the Water Act 2016 is fully implemented, and therefore, and this particular motion actually reinforces what is supposed to be done as per that act. Mr. Speaker, we know that the state has obligation under our constitution to ensure management and conservation of environment. And without water, you cannot conserve environment. Without water, we cannot manage our resources. We require water to actually industrialize as we aspire to become a newly industrialized nation by 2030. I can see my time is up. I support the motion. Thank you very much.
We shall now have a member for Embakasi South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion. The issue of water collection and storage is such an important issue for the country that we should prioritize in actually implementing the 2016 Act on the water harvesting and storage. Right now, as we are currently having all this rain that is running, that is raining, we are not we are allowing the water to run through to the Indian Ocean. We have water spilling into the Indian Ocean 24 hours through Earth River, and the same thing is also happening. Water is running through all the way to Indian Ocean on Tana River, and yet, come August, we'll start having water rationing. And on places like Nairobi County as a whole, we have challenges. We have actually cartels and huge businesses of water bowsers selling water to us. My people from Mukuru kwa Njenga, Mukuru kwa Ruben, and Embakasi South as a whole, we pay heavily for the purchase of water, be it 30 shillings or 50 shillings for a 20-liter jerry can. And this is the back-breaking job for our people, for my people who have to carry the 20-liter jerry can all the way to their houses. Yet I remember a few decades back, about 2 decades back, we used to drink tap water. We need to get ourselves to the point whereby we have collected enough water, we have stored enough water, and we've purified that water so that we're able to consume it from our water taps. Also, on the issue of irrigation, all this water is running to Indian Ocean, and yet we would have had an opportunity to use the water if we had harvested it properly and kept it, collected it properly, to be able to do irrigation. So we have challenges of food shortages, and yet we are the ones that are not doing collecting the water during the rainy season. I stand to, I beg to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Ole Sang.
And Honorable Speaker, let me take this chance to appreciate Honorable George Kariuki for bringing such a very important motion. Honorable Speaker, probably we should educate our government, especially the Ministry of Water, both in the national and county government, on the importance of water. Honorable Speaker, water is life, and 75% of our body is actually made of water. When you drink water, it refreshes you. When you bathe, it also refreshes you. When you are sick and water is used as an infusion to your bloodstream, it rejuvenates you. So water, Honorable Speaker, is very important, and the Ministry of Water, both in the national and county government, should actually know that they are in charge of a very important resource in the human life that we cannot live without. And that goes with the importance that we attach to that ministry. They should now work very hard and make sure that they have implemented this motion as quick as possible. Honorable Speaker, water can be used as a tourist attraction. Imagine all the run of water that we have been seeing in our streets in Nairobi being tapped into an artificial lake somewhere in Ruai, because I know the direction of all this water, somewhere in Ruai. And then we have a lake that is as big as the lake that is in the middle of Geneva, a tourist attraction lake that our generation and our children will be happy to be visiting that particular lake and enjoying the cool breeze that comes as a result of the lake, instead of all of us traveling all the way to Mombasa, traveling all the way to Lake Victoria. Honorable Speaker, any hotel that is around the water body is normally a tourist attraction. So you can imagine hotels that will have around Ruai if you have a lake in Ruai. Honorable Speaker, in the achievement of our Big Four agenda, especially the agenda of food security, we need water. And we need water, especially this water that goes to waste, the run of water. If this water can be tapped, and we can use this water not only for irrigation, because I have had many members talking about irrigation. Let us also think of how much fish we can get from this water if it becomes maybe an artificial lake, or if we use this run of water to create several ponds all the way from Ruai to Makueni to Tana River, where all this water drain to. Honorable Speaker, remember also that when we have this run of water, it causes soil erosion. And most of these soils are from highlands, and they are very fertile. And they are deposited on our lowlands. And our lowlands usually lack rain, but they have very fertile soil. Like what we have just seen, the soil that is actually blocking the whole of Narok River at a place called Suswa. All that soil comes from Mount Suswa and Malongonot, volcanic, fertile soil. If we can as well now have very big dams at around Mount Suswa and Mount Longonot, then this water can be used for drainage, for irrigation downstream on the Suswa plains. And since the dam will be on top of a mountain, we'll only use gravity to irrigate these lowlands that usually lack rains. Because of time, Honorable Speaker, I do support this motion, not only in this House, but also in the implementation phase that is rested on the Ministry of Water both in the national and county government. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. To my left now, and you know, I would have a bias for the lead members. I get the sense we haven't given.
Persons with disabilities.
Order, Honorable Sankoku, you have just spoken. So, you know, the honorable ladies need to file and register interest to speak. It will be good for you to register with your card. But for now, to my left, let me give Honorable Ole Kenta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to say that I am supporting the motion and commend the mover. Mr. Speaker, this is not really a new motion. It has been coming on and off over the years. So I believe the law is also supporting it, but the problem has been the implementation. And I think we should actually ensure as Parliament that the motions we pass, as Honorable Lulova has said, are actually implemented. Mr. Speaker, I come from Narok. In fact, Narok town is in my constituency, and it has become a case study in the issue of flooding. And the cause of such flooding is actually the destruction of the environment, especially the more forest. And even if we build as many dams as we can, we cannot be able to sustain or save the environment from destruction if we do not save our forests. Indeed, when you look at the flooding at Suswa, which has actually been causing a lot of problems, which is causing a lot of economic hardships, people sleep there throughout the night, there is no transport and all that. In fact, most of it is caused by the soil erosion caused by the mining of sand in those areas, and also the destruction of the forest around Mount Longonot. So until and unless we actually protect our forests, there is no way we can actually contain this water. If we do not also elect professional managers for places like Nairobi, if we are going to always elect political managers, then I can assure you there is nothing we can do for this country, because it's getting worse by the year and by the day. So we really need to look at who are managers of our counties, who are managers of our cities, and who are managers of our resources. Because I think what is ailing Kenya is actually the misapplication of resources and the wrong priorities. Mr. Speaker, Kenya will be a wonderful country if you could only divorce politics from development. Like, for example, we have got a good environment as far as tourism is concerned, as far as farming is concerned. But what we are doing is that we are actually importing grain from the neighboring countries. We are importing fake fertilizer for our farmers just because a few corrupt elements must benefit in this country. And unless we look at and change our moral outlook and society's moral fabric, I can assure the members of parliament that we are doing nothing in this country. We are hearing the hue and cry of farmers all over, be it the rice farmers in Mwea, be it the maize farmers in Rift Valley, be it the wheat farmers in Narok, the barley farmers. The cry is that we have nowhere to sell our crops. So even if we have all the water in this world, but our farmers are not benefiting, then we are doing nothing. Mr. Speaker, I was in the last parliament, and I was in the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. And what is worrying some of us now is that the people who are actually castigating the so-called cat workers are now together with the cat workers. So if that is the way we are going as a country, we are going nowhere. So I support the motion. We need to irrigate our farms. We need to raise our livestock. We need to actually save life. As somebody said, water is life. But in Kenya, what is it becoming? It is becoming death. Our people are dying by the dozens. Floods are affecting everybody. So I can only urge my colleagues here that let us look at this country as ours. Let us ensure that the government, because we are actually a third arm of the government, let us ensure that government actually implements what we pass in parliament. Let us not be actually subservient to the executive as that is happening, because that is what is actually ailing this country. So I beg to support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Before I give Honorable Ashira Kabinga, who is top here, allow me to, in light of my earlier statement, give to Honorable Bayu, member for Kilifi, who is top in the women, honorable ladies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support a motion brought in by Honorable George Kariuki. Mr. Speaker, as we say in Swahili, maji ni uhai. I think this is a very important motion, and I'll speak for the collection and storage management of water in the whole country, and more in the Kilifi County. Mr. Speaker, right away, the Magarini constituency in Kilifi County is flooded. But in the next 4 months, we'll be sending or distributing food and water for our people. We need storage tanks, storage facilities in our places, as now it's raining. It's all over flooded. We look at Tana River, almost the whole county is flooded. But once this water is drained all in the ocean, we go back to drought. Our people lack water, drinking water. Animals lack water. So I appeal, and because water is devolved, appeal to the county government, and more so the Kilifi county government, to provide storage facilities for water to all schools, primary schools and secondary schools, provide them with water tanks so that they can collect this water for use, house use, animal use. Let children use clean water, and more for irrigation. Mr. Speaker, Ganze constituency is rated one of the poorest, hunger, education, everything. But as now the water is being drained, goes down to the Indian Ocean, we need collection facilities, water ponds dug in these constituencies so that water can be collected for future use. Mr. Speaker, I support this motion. Thank you.
Yes, I can tell, Honorable Kabiga, you are top on your feet. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for giving our ladies that chance. I don't mind, Mr. Speaker. I want to support this motion by my neighbor, Honorable George Kariuki. Mr. Speaker, with the growing scarcity of water and climate change and rapid urbanization and the increased demand for water, water harvesting and storage becomes a very, very important aspect in our lives, Mr. Speaker. This motion calls for water harvesting and management to reduce water consumption, alleviate stormwater and runoff, stormwater runoff, and provide drinking water for our people, Mr. Speaker.
The whole of Kenya, there is no institution, there is no place where water is not needed. Let us talk of schools, let us talk of universities, let us talk of hospitals and industries. All these places need water. But again, when we come to our rural areas, we have always looked at what happens to our old mothers and the young girls whenever they go out to look for water. Water has become a source of war because when water is scarce, women fight because they make long queues throughout the night and throughout the days looking for water. So I want to support that this government goes up in speed and make sure that systems have been put in place which support the correction and the storage of water so that this water can be able to reach people. We are a blessed land because God has given us rain. The rains which are there, which makes us see water going down and going to the oceans, which are not used. We should use this water so that if we harvest, the water is going to assist our people, the industrialization will come up, and we are going to realize the big fall because there is no agricultural sector which cannot need this water. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support this motion, and if possible, the government to start implementing immediately. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall we now have Honorable Alpha Odieki, member, Honorable Alpha Odieki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity. My colleague, you, for me to contribute to this motion.
The member for Rally is disgraced. I think, honestly, temporarily, I think so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, number one, I stand to support this motion, a very critical one from our colleague about water in our country. I want to be very brief. Number one, water is a basic need in our homes. It's unfortunate that our country is only reactive. It only waits for disaster to happen, people to lose lives, for it to react on it. And after that, they easily forget. May I recommend, lest the government be very proactive. Let's pass a bill or a law when somebody is developing in his various homes. He should have a water catchment storage tank before the building plan is even approved. We lose a lot of water during rain season, causing a lot of damage, simply because we are not conserving our environment. Currently, we are developing every day. Our natural resources are being converted to very beautiful homesteads. But you find a client-based water bill, but in that homestead, there is no water harvested. Now, I recommend let's have two. Our government should make sure at least it can supply, it can afford at least one water tank to every homestead in rural areas. In CDF and other areas, the county government, it's putting more funds to things which are not adding money value to anybody. But let's try to make a scheme the upper side of the road. Now, the natural way that all along what has been passing, it is now directed to one point, the basic fundamental requirements of our basic lives. Otherwise, I support this motion 100%. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I must give a red member again, and the one on top of the list is Honorable Kibe Wajiko. Let's be clear whether you are actually on record. Is the mic working?
And wishing that this motion will not go unacted on Monday. And one elderly man informed me that the last time we experienced this kind of rainfall that like we're experiencing in this country was in 1991. And that goes to show that, of course, we've been in a system to ensure stormwater drainage. I know, Mr. Speaker, that, of course, the issue of stormwater drainage is vested in the county. In instances, we get the drainage water or the rainwater mixing up with the sewer. And as we develop this kind of water system, it is important to ensure that we have a proper system so that we don't get contamination. And like my colleagues have said, this water can go into various uses. We know how much water is used to beautify this city, for example, Nairobi, when you're trying to water the crops. And water harvested through these systems can be used for such purposes, as well as cleaning up the cities. I happened to be privileged, Mr. Speaker, to visit Israel some times back. And I was really mesmerized by what they do there. We know very well Israel is a very dry country, but they have a very good system where they ensure they recycle sewage water. And you know, they also ensure that, of course, they have the water used for domestic use, but at the same time, they have a system after the sewer water is cleaned to ensure that they provide farmers with the water to do their farming. Mr. Speaker, sir, here we've been endowed with a good environment. We've been endowed with good rainfall. And it's unfortunate that we are not making use of the water that we are given. So I want to support this motion and once again request that the implementation committee will follow up to ensure it is implemented to the latter. Thank you very much.
I must, before getting back to the right, I must really get to the left now. Honorable Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this important opportunity to contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, they say water is life. Water is life because water has life-enhancing and also destructive potential. We have seen during this period of heavy rains, Mr. Speaker, the kind of destruction that can cause. So I want to support this motion because this motion, Mr. Speaker, speaks to our planning systems in this country, especially city planning systems. Because, Mr. Speaker, during dry spells, our taps run dry. But during the rainy season like now, we experience flooding,
We also experience traffic jams. We also experience challenges like blockage of sewages and all that. Mr. Speaker, I think this country needs to borrow from other countries that have successfully managed water, drainage, and storage, particularly countries like Japan, Germany, the US, Singapore, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, a country like Netherlands, which is a country which is almost 60% below the sea level. The way they have managed this aspect of water storage, Mr. Speaker, it's commendable. We also need to have a holistic approach to our city planning, especially the city of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of how we manage our water storage and sewage system. Mr. Speaker, if you go to a country like Netherlands, specifically the city of Rotterdam, they have a very good model of water storage, especially rainwater storage. Mr. Speaker, it is time for this country to think of how we can give incentives to construction companies or to individuals so that they can come up with what we call the green roofs for water tapping and for safe and clean water. Mr. Speaker, in a country like Netherlands, they have what we call the water plazas. Water plazas, these are open grounds that pick water from the road drainage systems, store the water during rain seasons, and when we have a dry spell, these open spaces can be used for other things, maybe like sports and all that. We also need to review the design of our car parks in this country. In Netherlands, for example, their car parks are a multifunctional used when per capita water levels is 600 cubic meters compared to the global average of 1,000 meters. So this bill is more appropriate, and Mr. Speaker, I support it and encourage that we need to integrate this into our city planning system, and also even areas which are flood-proof areas like Budalangi and others. I support this motion, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Kiai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I stand to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, every year we receive a lot of heavy rainfall throughout this country. And every year, in the months of April, May, or thereabouts, we receive a lot of rain. But this water drains into our rivers, lakes, and oceans without us taking advantage of the same. Mr. Speaker, sir, you realize that every year in urban centers, whenever it rains, we always have issues of clogged drainage, unpassable roads, and of course, it makes communication between one town or the other very difficult because of the issue of drainage. Mr. Speaker, sir, when I stand here to support this motion, is because I know what we can do with the water that can be conserved, the storm water that can be conserved after it has been harvested. We are talking of having enough water stored in water pans, in dams, in tanks, to ensure that the same water can be used during the dry season. For example, if water was to be harvested in Nairobi and put in a dam, we can use this dam, number one, to recycle this water for drinking or for other purposes. We could also use the same water for sporting activities like fishing, boat competition, and others. Mr. Speaker, sir, we could start what is known as urban farming. using this water to grow what we can call quick-growing crops, like tomatoes and the vegetables. Mr. Speaker, sir, it can be made mandatory to ensure that any building that is put up in urban centers, before it is approved, one of the things that it should have is maybe a tank or some mechanism to harvest rainwater and store the same to be used during the dry period. We have always talked about having a healthy population, and I think by conserving this water and harvesting the same, we could use it for fish farming and the like to ensure that the nutrition aspect of the population is also taken care of. The over-reliance of rainwater to ensure that we grow crops is one thing that we need to look at seriously. Why? The growing urban population and the need for water to serve the growing population has not been met with equal development to ensure that this population is served with sufficient amounts of water. And the one ways of bridging that gap would be to ensure that any storm water, any rainwater is harvested and stored to be used by this growing population. As I finish, Mr. Speaker, sir, when you look to towns that are along the coastal area, you realize they have a lot of saline water, but rarely do they have clean drinking water. I've had a chance to see people around Watamu harvesting water from tarmac roads. Suppose we had a formula to harvest such water, the rainwater, kept in a clean environment. It would save such people from drinking such water. It is important that such towns that are along the coastal strip ensure that the very thirsty population along the coastal region is served by this water that is harvested, that in the end mainly drains into the ocean. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support the motion. Thank you.
Honorable Member for Kitutu Masaba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me a chance to contribute to this very, very important motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is clear, and it is also a matter of common notoriety that water is life. And when we say that water is life, Mr. Speaker, sir, the truth of the matter is that this country of ours enjoys a lot of water throughout the year. When you go out of this country, you go to some other jurisdictions, you realize that many countries actually do not have water. But what do we do, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the water that we have? It is sad that when we are blessed with the resource called water, like this time round, more to it that we experience is the parts of the day, Mr. Speaker, not prepared to ensure that we tap the water that we receive, the natural water that we receive, so that we are able to put it to good use. If, for example, I talk about Nyamira County, where I come from, if you go to the county itself, you go to the hotels, you go to other, centers, schools, you'll be shocked, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there is a serious shortage of water. Like when we have had a dry spell for a short period, we have had serious challenges of water. And the reason that we are lacking this water is because we don't have collection points where we can be able to store water. And I will therefore urge this government, Mr. Speaker, sir, to take note that we should be able to have collection centers, water collection centers. We store this water or we tap this water at this particular time when we are placed, so that we are able to utilize it after the rains are off. It is normally a matter of great shame when we have had this water for several days, and once maybe the rains are off, we start experiencing shortage of water. I will therefore urge that the government takes judicial notice of the fact that this natural resource that we enjoy should not be put to waste, but should be collected, stored, and utilized at the most appropriate time. Mr. Speaker, sir, yesterday, I happened to have been a victim of the vagaries of these rains, because I was stuck at a place called Suswa for more than 12 hours, because you could not move in any direction. We were sandwiched. So when we have water of that nature, as my good friend Sankok said, this water should be collected. This water should be available for use. This water should be there for us to ensure that it's utilized. So I would urge, just as my other speakers have said, that we should not have a good motion like this merely debated and put to the dustbin. We should allow it to be implemented. We should actually
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support Mr. GK for bringing this motion, although I thought he'll extend it not only to the major cities and towns, also to our villages and the rural areas where we also need this water to really be harvested. I'm looking at a situation where we need to operationalize this National Water Storage and Harvesting Authority, so that it can be able to facilitate from all the villages. They can be able to take care of water ponds where our pastoralists can have areas of giving their animals water during dry spells. Now we have a lot of water in Isiolo. 2 months later, we'll hear that animals are dying. We have so much water flowing in Maimahiu. 2 months down the line, animals will be dying. And we can create those water ponds such that they are well done, they are not having a lot of silt. That means the water and the environment is conserved well, and the animals will be having a lot of water. We have been tendered to beggars. We are going around borrowing tanks from companies that are manufacturing tanks as CSR programs to have water harvested. I think this issue of water harvesting should be done as up. And I support Mheshimiwa Miruka here, who is saying that we should create a bill. He should come up with that bill of whereby everyone who is constructing a building today should have water storage for